Shadows in the night. The encounter. The city lay blanketed in a stifling quiet, its darkness a strange comfort for those heading home after a long day. Alicia Evans, a woman of quiet strength and conviction, stepped off the last bus, her mind adrift in thoughts of her future, her family, and her dreams. As she walked, her mind settled on one particular hope, the promise of a life shared with her boyfriend, Adam, whose support and encouragement had been a source of light for her during trying times. Alicia's journey had never been easy. Growing up in a low-income neighborhood and witnessing the struggles of her community daily had made her painfully aware of systemic inequities, but she refused to let herself be defined by them. From her early years, Alicia dreamed of becoming a doctor, dedicating herself to a profession where she could heal and serve. She worked tirelessly as a physician's assistant, saving for medical school, driven by her love for her patients and her belief in a better future. Tonight, however, her thoughts were interrupted as she noticed a patrol car slowly roll past her. The officer inside was alone, eyes trained on her with an unsettling intensity. She felt her stomach tighten. The look was familiar, one she had learned to recognize and sidestep since childhood. Normally, she could shrug off such glances, but something about this one felt different. The officer stepped out, his posture relaxed, but his expression dark with intent. His badge glinted under the streetlight, casting a cold reflection. "Out a bit late, aren't we?" he asked, his voice barely masking a tone of superiority. Alicia forced a calm smile. "I'm just heading home after my shift at the clinic," she replied, keeping her voice steady. Years of working in challenging environments had taught her that staying composed could sometimes make a difference. His eyes slid over her as if searching for something hidden. "Clinic, ha," he sneered. "People like you working in medicine. Seems out of place." She bit her lip, unwilling to let his words get to her. But his gaze turned hostile, his smile vanishing. "Let's see what you're hiding," he ordered, stepping closer. Alicia's heart pounded. She had nothing to hide, but she knew the power he held. Any protest could make things worse. She reached into her pockets, showing him her phone and keys, praying this would satisfy him. But he didn't stop there. "Open your bag," he demanded, a cruel gleam in his eyes. Reluctantly, she obeyed, watching as her personal belongings were scattered onto the pavement. Her medical supplies, her planner, the few essentials she carried. Each item examined with mock scrutiny, as if any one of them would justify his prejudice. When he found nothing, the officer's face twisted with barely veiled irritation. He took a step closer, leaning in until his face was inches from hers. "What's a girl like you doing out here? Think you're above the rules?" His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with painful force, pulling her towards a shadowed alleyway. She resisted, her voice barely a whisper as fear threatened to overtake her. "Please, I haven't done anything." The street was deserted, every passing second amplifying her terror. Just when it seemed there was no escape, she remembered her phone. Trembling, she managed to dial Adam's number. Her boyfriend's voice, usually a source of calm, now felt like a lifeline. "Adam, I need you," she whispered, desperation choking her words. On the other end, Adam's tone turned deadly serious. "Where are you? Stay there. I'm coming." In that moment, Alicia's heart found strength. Adam was a CIA operative, a detail known to only a few. His experience was a contrast to her own, but it had made him resourceful, protective. And tonight, she needed every bit of that strength. "A plan for justice," Adam's response. Adam Diaz sat at his desk, sifting through case files from his recent CIA mission, the usual routines and debriefs filling his evening with the monotony he had long since grown accustomed to. His thoughts were drifting to Alicia, her dedication to her work, the way her compassion left an imprint on everyone she met. Though his own job often involved dark, morally ambiguous situations, she was his anchor to the idea of a better, more just world. Just then, his phone rang. "Alicia." He answered with a smile, but immediately, he knew something was wrong. Her voice was shaky, barely a whisper, and every word held the kind of raw fear he'd only heard in life and death situations. "Adam, I need your help. Please. I don't know what to do." Her voice broke, and the fear she was holding back chilled him to the bone. "I'm on my way. Stay put. I'll be there soon." Adam's voice was steady, though his insides roiled with rage. A cop had targeted her. Alicia, the woman who'd made it her life's mission to save lives. In the darkness of that moment, he realized he would stop at nothing to ensure that whoever did this to her would pay. Adam's mind shifted into tactical mode as he made his way to his car. His training in the CIA had prepared him for situations that required a delicate blend of intelligence and action, but never before had a mission felt so personal. He had spent years in the shadows, understanding power, reading people, and dismantling threats, but tonight was different. This was about Alicia, about defending her dignity, and about proving that the very system meant to protect the innocent could be held accountable. Driving through the night, Adam reviewed every detail Alicia had shared. The patrol car, the officer's voice dripping with disdain, the man's brutal, unyielding hands. All of it filled Adam with a simmering rage. But anger alone would get him nowhere. He needed a plan. He knew how easily cases like this got buried, written off as misunderstandings or swept away under layers of bureaucratic excuses. For the system to work against someone who had sworn to protect it, he'd need undeniable proof. Reaching Alicia, Adam saw her silhouette waiting under a street lamp. She stood alone, her arms wrapped around herself in a silent battle to hold herself together. He could see the lines of tension in her body, the way her shoulders shook with the barely contained fear. When she saw him, Alicia ran forward, her face streaked with tears she could no longer hold back. He held her close, letting her pain echo through him as his own resolve hardened. He didn't care about anything, Adam. Not the law, not my rights. Nothing. It was like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Alicia said, her voice trembling. "How is someone like that supposed to protect anyone?" Adam nodded, his heart breaking as he took in her words. He held her until her tears subsided, and then, with a gentleness that belied the storm raging inside him, he helped her to his car. "We're going to make this right, Alicia. I promise." As they drove to her apartment, Adam's mind began constructing a plan. He would start by identifying the officer, tracing every detail of his service record and public interactions. In his time with the CIA, Adam had become proficient at hacking systems, not out of malice, but as a necessary means to unravel complex intelligence webs. If the officer had done anything similar before, Adam would find it. And if the police department covered up his actions, Adam would expose them. They reached her apartment, where he guided her inside, carefully avoiding the questions of her worried neighbors. Once inside, he seated her on the couch, made her a cup of tea, and knelt beside her. "Can you tell me everything?" "I need every detail," he said softly. Alicia nodded, and through halting breaths, she recounted the night's events. Her voice faltered, her hands trembling as she recalled the officer's twisted expression, his mocking laughter, the way he'd torn through her belongings as if she were nothing but a suspect. Adam's jaw clenched as he listened, fury and sadness mingling within him. He hated that someone could reduce her to tears and fear in the span of an encounter. But as he heard the story, his plan crystallized. "Alicia," he began, his voice steady, "I'm going to find this officer. I'm going to gather everything I can on him. And if he's done anything like this before, it's coming out. But I'll need to access the police department's database. And," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I'll need you to stay strong through this, because it won't be an easy fight." Alicia looked at him, her eyes weary but determined. "Do whatever you have to do, Adam. I don't want him to get away with this." With her words of encouragement, Adam went to work. He set up his laptop in her living room, plugging into the secure server he'd rigged himself, ensuring that every step of his digital investigation remained off the grid. He initiated a series of protocols he'd once used to infiltrate international systems, but this time, his target was the local police department's files. He started by narrowing down the officers who had been on duty that night, checking the patrol routes and traffic camera footage for any clue that would lead him to the man who had hurt Alicia. After hours of cross-referencing, he found his match: Officer Jonathan Clark. The officer's personnel file revealed a lengthy career, peppered with incidents of questionable conduct, complaints of excessive force, and several allegations of harassment, all swept under the rug. It became clear that Clark's abuses weren't isolated. They were part of a pattern the department had repeatedly ignored. Adam leaned back, letting the weight of his discovery settle. Clark's record was a bleak testament to a system that allowed those meant to uphold the law to misuse it with impunity. It wasn't just Clark. It was the precinct, the department, and every individual who'd looked the other way, allowing him to continue his abuses. He knew that releasing this information publicly could lead to Clark's suspension, but he needed more: irrefutable evidence that would make it impossible for Clark's superiors to ignore. If he could access Clark's body camera footage from that night, he might get what he needed. The footage wasn't stored on local servers. Adam would need to breach a much more secure network. The police department system wasn't designed to be easily infiltrated, but Adam had the skills. And now he had the motive. He spent hours piecing together firewall bypasses, sifting through layers of encrypted storage, until he finally found the file he was looking for. When he clicked on the footage, the grainy images came to life on his screen. Clark's face appeared, his expression devoid of remorse or humanity. Adam clenched his fists as he watched Clark approach Alicia, watched him push her against the wall, his words barely audible but clear in their intent. He forced himself to watch every second, his anger tempered only by his determination to see justice done. By the time the footage ended, Adam had all he needed. He saved the file onto a secure drive, then backed it up twice, ensuring that he had the evidence even if Clark or his department tried to erase it. As dawn broke, Adam turned to Alicia, who had fallen asleep on the couch, exhaustion evident on her face. Gently, he placed a blanket over her, whispering, "We're going to bring him down, Alicia." He spent the next few hours gathering his contacts, calling on trusted allies both inside and outside the agency. Some were investigative journalists, others human rights lawyers. If Clark's department tried to bury the evidence, Adam was ready to go public. He wasn't just fighting for Alicia. He was fighting for everyone who'd ever been silenced by a corrupt system. By the time Alicia woke up, Adam had the beginnings of a case that would expose not only Clark, but also the department that had enabled him. He looked into her tired eyes, his own brimming with an intense promise. "We're going to do this," he said firmly. "And by the time we're done, they'll know they can't get away with this anymore." Alicia took his hand, a spark of hope reigniting in her heart. With Adam by her side, she wasn't just a victim. She was a warrior in the fight for justice, and together they would make sure her story was heard. Allies in the shadows. The fight begins. Adam spent the next few days gathering his resources, his mind laser-focused on a single mission: to make sure Alicia's story was heard and that Officer Jonathan Clark faced the consequences. He'd already collected Clark's body camera footage and internal records, but he knew he needed more. He needed allies who understood the stakes and could support him when the pressure started mounting from the authorities. Adam's first call was to an old friend, Jordan Foster, an investigative journalist with a reputation for uncovering hidden corruption. He had always been one to dig deeper, his stories taking down powerful individuals who thought they were untouchable. The two had met during one of Adam's covert missions abroad, and though they hadn't kept in close contact, Adam knew he could trust Jordan with this story. Adam dialed Jordan's number, the phone buzzing for what seemed like an eternity until his friend picked up. "Adam." Jordan's voice was laced with surprise. "It's been a while." "Too long, but I wouldn't call if it weren't important," Adam replied, wasting no time. "I need your help with something sensitive." It's about a cop abusing his power. And I've got proof." Jordan went silent, letting Adam's words sink in. "All right, I'm listening." Adam relayed the details of Alicia's ordeal, sparing none of the brutality. He described the footage, the systemic patterns he'd uncovered in Clark's record, and the way the department had turned a blind eye to repeated complaints. By the time he finished, Jordan's silence had shifted from stunned disbelief to the cold resolve that Adam knew would drive him to see this through. "Send me everything you have," Jordan said, his voice hard. "This isn't just one story. This is a pattern of abuse that's gone unchecked, and it's time people knew the truth." Adam felt a swell of gratitude as he heard the commitment in Jordan's voice. "Thanks, Jordan. Just be careful. The department is likely to fight back hard." "Wouldn't be my first time in the crosshairs," Jordan replied dryly. "But this time, we'll make sure they can't bury it." After sending over the files, Adam moved to his next step, mobilizing Alicia's community. She was well known at the clinic where she worked, respected for her kindness and her unrelenting passion for helping those around her. He knew that if her friends, colleagues, and neighbors could rally behind her, they could amplify her voice, forcing local authorities to acknowledge her story. Later that afternoon, Adam and Alicia met with her close friend Maya, a community organizer who had led numerous protests in the past. She was outspoken and unafraid, the type of person who believed in justice to her core. When Adam and Alicia entered the small cafe where they were meeting, Maya stood up immediately, hugging Alicia with a fierce protectiveness. "Alicia," Maya said, her voice choked with emotion, "why didn't you tell me sooner? I would've been here in a heartbeat." Alicia shrugged, a faint smile on her face. "It's all been a bit overwhelming. But now, we're ready to fight." Maya looked between Adam and Alicia, her gaze sharp with understanding. "So, what's the plan?" Adam explained the evidence he'd gathered, the journalists who were already on board, and his intention to escalate the issue if the police department refused to act. Maya listened, nodding along, her mind already racing with ideas. "We'll get a rally organized, a peaceful protest outside the precinct," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "People need to see that Alicia isn't just a victim. She's one of us, and we won't stand for this." As the plan took shape, Alicia felt a new sense of hope. Seeing her friends and community rally around her was empowering, a reminder that she wasn't alone. She'd spent so many years fighting to prove herself in a system that had made her feel invisible, but now, with Adam, Maya, and her community by her side, she felt that change was finally within reach. The protest was scheduled for that weekend. Flyers circulated through social media and in local neighborhoods, and word spread like wildfire. Adam could see the tension building, could feel the momentum shifting as more people learned of Alicia's story. She wasn't just another statistic. She was a person with dreams, someone who'd fought her whole life to rise above the stereotypes imposed on her, only to be brought down by someone who saw her humanity as a threat. On the day of the protest, a crowd began to gather outside the precinct. People held signs that read, "Justice for Alicia," and "End Police Abuse." Adam stood beside Alicia and Maya, scanning the crowd, noting familiar faces from the clinic, local activists, and even a few police reform advocates. As the crowd swelled, Jordan arrived, a camera crew in tow, documenting every sign, every chant, every voice raised in solidarity. He gave Adam a slight nod, a wordless affirmation that they were in this together. One by one, people came forward to share their own experiences, each story adding to the chorus of voices that refused to be silenced. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of urgency, a collective resolve to demand accountability. When it was Alicia's turn to speak, she took the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. But as she looked out over the crowd, she felt a wave of strength wash over her. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice clear despite the emotions simmering beneath the surface. "For years, I've dreamed of becoming a doctor so I could help people, to be a force for good in my community. But a few nights ago, someone tried to take that from me. He thought he could silence me, make me feel small, because I didn't fit his idea of what someone like me should be. But I refused to be silenced. The crowd erupted in applause, and Alicia felt tears sting her eyes. She took a steadying breath before continuing. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us who've been told that we don't belong, that we don't deserve justice. Today, I'm standing here because I refuse to live in fear. I refuse to let anyone take away my voice. Another wave of applause rose up, and Adam could see the fire in her eyes, the strength that had carried her through every hardship she ever faced. He felt a swell of pride, knowing that Alicia's words would resonate far beyond this moment. As Alicia finished speaking, Jordan approached her, his camera capturing the emotion in her face. "Alicia, I'd like to interview you, if that's all right," he said softly, sensing the weight of the moment. She nodded, and as she recounted her story on camera, Adam watched as her words rippled through the crowd, solidifying their resolve. He could see that she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was standing for everyone who had ever been told they didn't matter. Meanwhile, inside the precinct, Officer Jonathan Clark watched from a distance, his face twisted in anger. He'd heard about the protest, seen the reports spreading online, and the fury inside him grew with every mention of his name. In his eyes, he had done nothing wrong. He was simply enforcing the law, protecting his turf. But this public outcry was an affront to his authority, and he was determined to shut it down. Clark went to his superior, Captain Williams, a man whose career had been built on maintaining the status quo. He was wary of anything that could threaten the department's image, and when Clark mentioned the protest, Williams dismissed it as a passing issue. "They'll get tired soon enough," Williams said, his voice dismissive. "Besides, it's just one woman's word against yours. You're an officer. The public will side with you." But Clark wasn't satisfied. He knew that Adam's involvement meant this wasn't going to die down. He'd seen Adam before, knew he was a former CIA operative, and that meant trouble. If Adam started digging, Clark's carefully hidden misconduct could unravel, taking his career with it. The fury simmered beneath the surface as Clark vowed to shut down the protest, by any means necessary. Outside, as the protest drew to a close, Alicia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had confronted her fear, shared her story, and witnessed the power of collective action. With Adam's support and the community rallying around her, she knew that this was only the beginning. Later that night, Adam and Alicia returned to her apartment, exhausted but invigorated. They knew that the fight was far from over. Clark and his department would undoubtedly push back, but they were ready. Adam had been in dark places before, had taken down enemies with power and influence, but this was different. This was personal, and he would see it through. "Alicia," Adam said, his voice filled with quiet conviction, "we're going to keep pushing, and we're going to win." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the same determination. "No matter what they try, we won't back down." As the city settled into silence once more, Adam and Alicia knew that this fight, a battle for justice, dignity, and truth, was only just beginning. And with the strength of their community behind them, they were ready to face whatever came next. Retaliation and resilience, facing the backlash. The morning after the protest, Adam and Alicia found themselves in the crosshairs of an intensifying battle. What had started as a single voice standing up for justice had now become a movement, one that Officer Clark and his allies were determined to silence. It began subtly, with a few dismissive statements issued by the police department. A spokesperson at a press conference read a prepared statement with the kind of detachment that Adam had seen before, a calculated response designed to downplay Alicia's experience and discredit the movement. "The department respects all of its citizens and works tirelessly to ensure their safety," the spokesperson droned. "However, recent accusations have been exaggerated, and we urge the public to await a full investigation before passing judgment." Adam's jaw clenched as he watched the press conference live streamed on his laptop. He could feel the careful manipulation in their words, the department's attempt to make Alicia's story sound like nothing more than baseless allegations. Their careful wording was aimed at discrediting Alicia without any direct accusation, painting her as an unreliable witness, a tactic he had seen before in cases meant to diffuse public outrage. Alicia, seated beside him, sighed heavily, her face a mix of frustration and hurt. "They're twisting everything," she said, her voice laced with disbelief. "They're making it sound like I just made this up, like my story is just noise." Adam placed a comforting hand on hers. "This is exactly what they want you to feel, Alicia. They know you're a threat, and they're going to do everything they can to make you back down. But that's not going to happen. We're prepared for this." True to his words, Adam was already in action mode, lining up resources, contacting allies, and preparing for the next phase of their plan. Over the past week, he had made connections with local activists, civil rights organizations, and a legal team willing to take up Alicia's case pro bono. They were gearing up for a legal battle if necessary, ready to press charges against Officer Clark and the department if they attempted to intimidate her further. But the pressure wasn't just coming from the media and the department's statements. Within days, Alicia's phone began to ring non-stop, anonymous callers hurling accusations, insults, and threats. She tried to ignore them, but it was impossible to tune out the hatred and anger laced in every call. The once safe, comforting walls of her apartment now felt oppressive as she faced the reality of retaliation. "I can't believe people are doing this," she muttered, her voice shaking as she looked at her phone, which had just received another string of vitriolic messages. I thought people would care, that they'd want justice too." Adam's eyes hardened, his protective instincts flaring. "This isn't the first time people have tried to scare someone into silence, but they're scared, Alicia. Scared because you're telling the truth. We're not going to let them win." As the backlash intensified, Adam reached out to Maya, Alicia's friend and the organizer of the protest, who had continued her work tirelessly, mobilizing more allies and drawing the attention of larger social justice groups. Maya was a force to be reckoned with, and she had been in situations like this before. She was unfazed by the threats and relentless in her support for Alicia. "We're going to turn this around," Maya said with conviction when they met at her apartment that evening. "They want to intimidate us. Fine, we'll show them what resilience looks like." That night, Maya announced a second protest, one that would include representatives from several influential organizations. The message was clear. They would not be silenced, and they would not back down. The day of the second protest arrived, and a massive crowd gathered once again outside the precinct, this time with even more people in attendance. This protest was different from the first. It was not just about Alicia anymore. It was about the countless victims who had faced similar abuses, the people who had been ignored or silenced by a system that failed them. Jordan, the investigative journalist, was present with his camera crew, capturing every chant, every speaker, and every voice demanding justice. As Alicia took the stage to speak, her voice rang out clear and strong. She shared not only her own experience, but also stories from others who had reached out to her, each story a testament to the widespread impact of abuse by those sworn to protect. She spoke of the fear she had felt, the violation of trust, and the scars that such incidents left on their communities. "This isn't just about one officer," she said, her voice filled with a new fire. "This is about a system that allows people like him to thrive unchecked. We are here because we refuse to live in fear, and we refuse to let our voices be silenced." The crowd erupted in applause, and Adam watched with pride as Alicia stood before them, stronger than he had ever seen her. She was no longer just a victim. She had become a leader, a symbol of resistance and resilience for everyone who had been wronged. Inside the precinct, however, Captain Williams watched the protest with a growing sense of unease. The second protest had garnered even more media attention than the first, and the department's usual tactics of discrediting victims were failing to deter the movement. Alicia's story had gained traction not only locally but also on national news outlets, each one highlighting the calls for police accountability and reform. Fearing the potential fallout, Williams called a closed-door meeting with Officer Clark and a few other senior officers. His tone was grim as he addressed them. "We can't let this get any bigger," Williams said, his face lined with tension. "Our department's reputation is on the line. And if this continues, we'll all pay the price. Clark, I need you to keep a low profile. No more trouble. Do you understand?" But Clark's expression was cold, his jaw clenched in defiance. He had never liked being told what to do, and he felt no remorse for his actions. In his mind, Alicia and Adam were threats to his authority, and he was determined to put them in their place. "They're just loudmouths looking for attention," Clark spat. "They'll move on when they realize they don't stand a chance." "Perhaps," Williams replied, his voice tight. "But until then, you're going to be under scrutiny, and if anything comes up, you'll be the one taking the fall. Is that clear?" Clark gritted his teeth, barely managing to nod in agreement. But inside, a smoldering rage had taken root. He wasn't about to let some civilian and her CIA boyfriend ruin his career. As the protests continued, Adam began receiving threats as well. It became clear that someone in the department was leaking his and Alicia's personal information, perhaps in an attempt to turn public sentiment against them. Anonymous messages and emails flooded his inbox, full of veiled threats and intimidation tactics meant to scare him off. But Adam was undeterred. He knew exactly how to handle intimidation, and he wasn't about to back down. Instead, he used the information to track the sources of the threats, compiling a record of every message, every threat, and every attempt to discredit Alicia and the movement. He knew that these tactics could backfire spectacularly on the department if they were exposed to the public. Late one night, while Adam and Alicia were reviewing the latest wave of threats and planning their next steps, a knock at the door startled them. Adam immediately went on alert, signaling Alicia to stay back. He opened the door carefully, only to find Jordan standing there, his expression grim. "We need to talk," Jordan said as he stepped inside. "The department isn't just leaking information. They're trying to build a case against you, Adam." Adam's eyes narrowed, but he felt no surprise. Of course they are. It's the oldest trick in the book. Discredit anyone who challenges them. Jordan nodded, his face tense. "They're planning to allege that you hacked into their database illegally to get the footage and files. They want to charge you with a federal crime, which would not only discredit you, but also put Alicia's case at risk." Alicia's face drained of color as she processed the gravity of Jordan's words. "So, they're willing to turn this into a full-blown attack just to keep their secrets buried." Adam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "They're trying to intimidate us, to make us back down. But that's not going to happen. We're prepared for this." Jordan's face softened as he looked at Alicia. "We have allies, and we have the truth on our side. This isn't over yet. I've got contacts who are willing to help keep the public's focus on your story, to make sure the department can't pull this off without scrutiny." Adam nodded, grateful for Jordan's dedication. They knew they were up against a powerful opponent, but they also knew they weren't alone. With every attempt the department made to discredit them, the support for Alicia and her fight for justice only grew stronger. In the coming days, Adam and Alicia prepared themselves for what was to come. They held press conferences, gave interviews, and shared more of the stories that had been sent to them by others who had faced similar injustices. The public response was overwhelmingly supportive, and soon larger organizations began calling for an independent investigation into the police department's practices. Inside the precinct, Clark seethed with frustration. Every attempt to silence Alicia had only backfired, drawing more attention to the department's history of misconduct. His rage simmered, a dangerous impulse growing within him as he watched his once unquestioned authority begin to crumble. And as Adam and Alicia prepared for their next move, they knew that they were heading into dangerous territory. But no matter how intense the backlash became, they would not stop fighting. The truth was their weapon, and they would wield it until justice was served. Breaking the silence, the confrontation. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of threats, legal maneuvers, and relentless media coverage. Alicia's story had reached national headlines, drawing widespread support, but also intensifying the backlash. Adam was no stranger to tension, having spent years in the field where survival depended on his ability to think 10 steps ahead. But this fight, standing beside Alicia against a deeply entrenched system, was unlike any challenge he had faced before. This time, it wasn't just a mission, it was personal. With the pressure mounting, Adam's mind raced through their options. They were still holding strong, but the department was escalating its tactics with attempts to publicly paint Alicia as a disruptive influence in the community. They dug into her history, twisted details from her life, to make her appear as an unreliable witness. Even her achievements, her work in the clinic, were questioned. One evening, as Adam and Alicia sat together going through more anonymous threats sent to her phone, Adam's own phone buzzed with an alert. It was a text from Jordan, the journalist who had been by their side since the beginning. Emergency meeting. I have intel on the department's next move. Be careful. They're coming for you both. Need to discuss ASAP. Adam's face turned grim as he read the message. He knew the stakes were high, but this latest development sent a shiver down his spine. They're ramping up their game, he said, showing Alicia the message. She nodded, her expression hardened with a resilience that had grown stronger each day. Despite everything, she was standing firm, refusing to be silenced. What's the plan? Alicia asked, her voice steady but tinged with a quiet resolve. Adam looked at her, his gaze unwavering. We meet with Jordan, get the details, and prepare for whatever's next. But we're not backing down. That night, they met Jordan at a discreet location away from prying eyes. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Jordan handed Adam a file, his expression solemn. They've obtained a warrant to investigate you, Adam. They're using the claim that you hacked into the police database to make this a criminal case. They want you out of the picture so Alicia has no support. Adam's eyes narrowed. They're trying to turn this around on us, but they've underestimated us. Jordan nodded. I also found out that they're preparing a public smear campaign, leaking selective information to the press to undermine your credibility. But it's not just a media strategy. They've mobilized resources to make sure you're isolated, hoping the public will turn against you. Alicia clenched her fists, anger and frustration bubbling to the surface. So they're trying to discredit us, make us look like criminals just to keep their secrets hidden. Adam placed a calming hand on her shoulder. They'd want us to feel defeated, Alicia, but they're scared because we're getting too close to the truth. Jordan leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. I've also learned that they've been doctoring body camera footage and police reports. They're trying to erase any trace of Clark's misconduct. It's becoming more than just covering for one officer. This is a coordinated attempt to bury years of abuse. Adam's jaw tightened as he processed Jordan's words. He knew the lengths to which corrupt institutions would go to protect themselves, but the sheer scale of this operation was staggering. This was no longer just about one rogue officer. It was about a system that had allowed individuals like Clark to act without consequence. We need to expose them, Adam said, his voice filled with steely determination. All of it. The altered reports, the cover-ups, the threats, everything. Jordan nodded. I've got a few contacts in law enforcement reform groups who could help, and some allies in the media willing to push the story to national coverage. We're building momentum, but you need to be prepared for the fallout. Adam and Alicia shared a look, a silent agreement passing between them. They had come too far to turn back now, and they both knew that justice demanded sacrifice. With Jordan's help, they set to work, gathering every piece of evidence they could find, reaching out to community leaders, and building alliances with influential voices. Their fight was no longer just for Alicia's case. It had become a movement. Days later, a breaking point arrived in the form of an emergency press conference called by the department. The room was filled with reporters and members of the public, tensions running high as Captain Williams took the podium, flanked by other senior officers. In a calculated move, the captain read from a statement, his voice even and detached. "We are committed to maintaining the safety and integrity of our community. However, recent unfounded accusations have caused harm to our department's reputation. We are here to set the record straight and assure the public that our officers acted within the bounds of the law. We urge the community to be cautious about unsubstantiated claims." Adam and Alicia watched the live broadcast from Jordan's office, feeling a mix of anger and resolve as the captain continued. He listed details that painted Alicia's story as a misunderstanding and then turned his attention to Adam, referencing unauthorized access to sensitive police data, attempting to paint him as a rogue actor with ulterior motives. But they had prepared for this moment. Just as Captain Williams finished his statement, Jordan nodded to Adam, signaling that it was time to release the files they had gathered. The doctored police reports, the evidence of intimidation tactics, and the body cam footage showing Clark's blatant abuse of power. Jordan's media contacts went live with the story, broadcasting it to every major news outlet. Within minutes, the footage and documents were circulating widely, sparking a firestorm of outrage and disbelief. Captain Williams, still standing at the podium, was interrupted as reporters began receiving updates on their devices. Phones buzzed, screens flashed with breaking news alerts, and suddenly, the room was filled with the sound of rapid-fire questions, accusations, and demands for answers. "Captain Williams, do you have a response to the newly released footage showing Officer Clark's abusive conduct?" One reporter shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaotic noise of the room. "Is it true that your department altered reports and threatened witnesses?" Another demanded, thrusting a microphone toward the podium. Williams's face paled, his carefully crafted demeanor slipping as he struggled to maintain control. We will be conducting a thorough review of these new claims," he stammered, his voice faltering under the barrage of questions. But the damage was done. In the hours that followed, the public's reaction was swift and unforgiving. The footage of Clark's assault on Alicia, the leaked reports, and the evidence of a coordinated cover-up ignited a nationwide backlash. Social media erupted with calls for accountability, for reform, and for an end to the culture of impunity that had allowed these abuses to flourish. People from all over shared their stories, each voice adding to the growing demand for justice. As the story spread, Adam and Alicia became symbols of resilience in the face of systemic oppression, their fight inspiring countless others to stand up and speak out. But the department wasn't done yet. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Clark himself had yet to face formal charges, protected by a complex web of legal and bureaucratic safeguards. Adam knew it was time to confront Clark directly. With Jordan's help, they arranged a meeting with a lawyer who specialized in cases of police misconduct, someone with a reputation for dismantling even the most formidable defenses. The lawyer agreed to take on their case, filing a civil suit that would force Clark and the department to answer for their actions in court. The news of the lawsuit sent shockwaves through the department. Officers who had once closed ranks around Clark began to distance themselves, sensing the inevitable fallout. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was tense, the usual camaraderie replaced by whispers and glances as Clark found himself increasingly isolated. Finally, the day came for Adam and Alicia to face Clark in court. They walked into the courthouse with their heads held high, surrounded by supporters who had stood by them through the darkest days of their fight. As they entered the courtroom, they saw Clark seated at the defendant's table, his face twisted in a mixture of anger and defiance. But beneath his bravado, Adam could see the cracks in his facade, the fear that he was no longer untouchable. The trial was intense, the air thick with anticipation as witnesses took the stand, each one recounting their own experiences with Clark, each story a damning piece of evidence. When it was Alicia's turn to testify, she spoke with a calm strength that left the room in silence. She described the pain, the fear, and the resilience that had carried her through, her words resonating with everyone who had ever been told they didn't matter. When Adam took the stand, he shared his perspective as a former intelligence officer, detailing the lengths to which he had gone to uncover the truth, to protect Alicia, and to expose a system that had failed her and countless others. His testimony was a powerful reminder that justice wasn't just a word. It was a fight, a commitment, and a promise to those who had been wronged. By the end of the trial, the verdict was clear. The evidence against Clark was overwhelming. His lies laid bare for all to see. The jury found him guilty on multiple counts, including assault, abuse of power, and misconduct. The department, too, was held accountable, facing significant fines and mandated reforms to prevent future abuses. As they left the courthouse, Adam and Alicia were greeted by a crowd of supporters, their voices raised in celebration, their faces alight with hope. Their fight had been long and grueling, but they had prevailed. Alicia had found justice, and together they had shone a light on the darkness that had plagued their community for too long. In the days that followed, Alicia returned to her work at the clinic, her spirit renewed, her purpose stronger than ever. Adam stood by her side, proud of the woman she had become, knowing that her resilience had changed not only her life, but the lives of countless others. And though their journey had been marked by hardship, they knew that they had ignited a spark of change, one that would continue to burn long after the dust had settled. Beyond justice, healing, and new beginnings, the victory in the courtroom was a powerful moment, a culmination of months of fear, resilience, and hard-fought justice. As the gavel fell and Officer Jonathan Clark was led away in handcuffs, the air in the room was charged with a sense of triumph, but also relief. Adam and Alicia had won, and their story would not be forgotten. Leaving the courthouse, Alicia and Adam were met with applause and cheers from their friends, supporters, and members of the community who had rallied behind them. The journey had been harrowing, but the unwavering support from those who believed in them gave Alicia a profound sense of hope. She could see the impact her story had already made, the spark of change that would continue to burn long after this moment. As the crowd began to disperse, Alicia felt a sense of peace settle over her, but she also knew that this victory wasn't the end. It was a beginning. She glanced at Adam, who gave her a reassuring nod, as if sensing her thoughts. They had exposed the injustice in their city, challenged a corrupt system, and set a precedent that would make it harder for others like Clark to wield power without accountability. But there was more to be done. In the weeks following the trial, Alicia returned to her work at the clinic. She felt different now, her confidence renewed and her purpose sharpened by everything she had endured. Patients greeted her with words of encouragement, her colleagues treated her with newfound respect, and the community she served showed her a warmth she had never felt before. She was no longer just Alicia, the nurse at the clinic. She was Alicia, the fighter, the voice for those who had been silenced. Adam, too, found himself changed by the experience. He had been hardened by years in the intelligence world, where trust was rare and motives were always questioned. But standing beside Alicia, seeing her courage unfold, had reminded him of the power of conviction and resilience. He decided to take a step back from his CIA work, choosing instead to focus on advocacy, leveraging his skills and connections to fight against corruption and abuse on a broader scale. One evening, as they sat together on Alicia's small balcony overlooking the city, they talked about their future. The air was warm, carrying the scent of summer blooms, and the city lights sparkled in the distance. "Alicia, I don't think I've ever told you this," Adam began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But you've changed me, watching you fight for what's right, standing up against everything that tried to tear you down. You've reminded me what it means to be human. I want to keep doing this with you, fighting for justice, for people who don't have a voice." Alicia smiled, taking his hand in hers. "I want that too, but not just fighting. I want to build something. I want to create a place where people can feel safe, where they can heal, and where they can find strength. The idea blossomed between them, growing with every conversation. Together, they envisioned a foundation dedicated to supporting victims of abuse, a safe haven where people could seek resources, therapy, and legal aid. It would be a place where survivors like Alicia could reclaim their voices and where individuals could find the strength to pursue justice without fear. They called it the Evans-Diaz Foundation for Justice and Healing. With Adam's connections and Alicia's deep ties to the community, they quickly garnered support, securing funding from various organizations, activists, and even some public figures who had been moved by their story. News of the foundation spread rapidly, and soon people from across the city reached out, each person with a story, each story a testament to the need for a place like this. As the foundation took shape, Alicia found herself healing in unexpected ways. Her trauma had left scars, but as she helped others find their own paths to recovery, she felt her own pain begin to transform. She saw her struggles mirrored in the faces of the people she helped, but she also saw hope. Every success story, every small victory, felt like another piece of her own journey toward wholeness. The foundation's opening ceremony was a modest affair, held in a community center near the clinic where Alicia worked. Friends, colleagues, supporters, and members of the media gathered to celebrate this new chapter. Maya, Alicia's friend and the activist who had been by her side since the beginning, helped organize the event, her energy and passion inspiring everyone around her. Standing at the podium, Alicia looked out at the crowd, feeling a familiar mixture of nerves and excitement. She took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in before speaking. "When I first found myself in the darkness of injustice, I was afraid," she began, her voice resonant with strength. "I felt small, powerless, and alone. But standing here now, I see that I was never alone. Each one of you, everyone who has believed in this fight, has given me strength. And now we're creating a place where that strength can grow, where others can find hope." Her words were met with applause, and Adam stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder as he addressed the crowd. "This foundation is about more than just fighting injustice," he said. "It's about healing, resilience, and the courage to stand up even when the odds are against you. Together, we can create a world where no one has to walk this path alone." As the ceremony concluded, people lined up to speak with Alicia and Adam, each one sharing stories, words of gratitude, and expressions of hope. Alicia met each person with compassion, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose that transcended the hardships she had faced. The pain and fear she had once felt had become her strength, her motivation to help others heal. Over the following months, the foundation grew, offering legal services, counseling, and outreach programs to those affected by abuse and systemic injustice. Survivors from across the city and beyond came forward, sharing their stories, each one adding to the foundation's mission and fueling its growth. The foundation's impact reached beyond the community, drawing attention from lawmakers, activists, and advocacy groups across the country. Inspired by Alicia's story, several states began drafting new policies to address abuse of power within law enforcement, aiming to hold officers more accountable and to protect the rights of victims. As Alicia and Adam's foundation flourished, they received letters, emails, and calls from people who had found hope in their story. One letter, in particular, stood out to Alicia. It was from a young woman who had been struggling to speak up after facing her own experience of injustice. She wrote about how Alicia's courage had given her the strength to confront her own fears, to find her voice, and to reclaim her life. Reading the letter, Alicia felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She realized that her fight, her pain, and her journey had come full circle. She had transformed her trauma into something beautiful, something that had the power to change lives. One quiet evening, Alicia and Adam stood on the balcony once more, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The world around them had changed, and so had they. The love and support they had for each other had been tested and strengthened, and they had built something meaningful from the rubble of hardship. "Thank you, Adam," Alicia said softly, leaning against him. "Thank you for standing by me, for helping me find my strength." Adam wrapped his arms around her, his voice filled with quiet pride. "No, thank you, Alicia. You're the one who showed me what strength really means. You gave me hope, purpose. Together, we've made a difference." They stayed there, side by side, knowing that this was only the beginning of a legacy they had built together. Their story had started with fear, pain, and injustice, but it had blossomed into something far greater. A journey of healing, resilience, and a commitment to protect the dignity of others. And in the hearts of those who had been touched by their story, the seeds of change continued to grow, each one a testament to the power of courage, love, and unwavering determination.